ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. We don't have any guests on this week, so it's myself for the hour with yourselves as well. Lots to talk about as ever. Let's just get the comments there. Do fire comments in. The family party in the background, we're busy with our election preparations. I've been working on the script for the party election broadcast today. Our leaflet that's going to go to every house in Scotland is coming on. It's pretty well there, pretty well designed. So we'll be raising the money for that starting at the end of this week. It's going to cost somewhere in the region of £25,000 to get them printed. And then 2.8 million of them will wing their way to every letterbox in Scotland, all being well. I mean, our secret weapon this year, we've put this fetus image on the back, which we think is going to get a very strong response. We've already checked it with Royal Mail. So it is approved. So it's ready to go. There are not going to be any problems, or there shouldn't be any problems with that. So we think that will cause quite a stir. It will provoke a lot of opposition that might get attention for us. But more importantly, people who are pro-life but might have been thinking about voting for a pro-abortion party, hopefully that will help them to clarify their decision and then vote for us after all. So we've been doing a lot of work on that. Right. Good evening, Tommy. Welcome. Now, all sorts of things going on. I've got far too much material to fit in tonight. So, hello, Daniel. Yes, the Scottish Catholic Medical Association. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to going to the Pro-Life Society at Glasgow University. I think that's next week, one evening next week. So, yes, I'm very much looking forward to those. Always appreciate invitations. With the family party, sometimes setting up events can be quite challenging. They get cancelled for all sorts of reasons. You'd be amazed at the people who object to family party events going on. But we've had some good events recently, letting people know about our election plans. One thing to inform you of, actually, is we're having a dinner, a campaign dinner, which is in March. Keep your eye open on social media. It's not within the next couple of weeks. It's a little bit further away. But we are having a campaign dinner. So the details of that might actually be in the newsletter that comes out tomorrow. So if you don't go through the newsletter, nip along to our website, sign up for the newsletter, and you will know everything that's going on there. Right. This is an interesting document I came across. The National Security Strategy of the United States of America, November 2025. So it's pretty up to date. And what drew my attention to it was someone pointed out that it said as part of their national defense strategy, security strategy, they need more families forming, man-woman families forming, married, and having more children. They need more traditional families. That was vital to national security. And they're right. Oh, they're absolutely right. And that's true for any country. If they're not forming stable families, healthy family life, reproducing, as well, that tends to happen. Conventional family life results in more children. When people get man and woman get married, they tend to have more children. And so they're recognizing this as a vital part of securing the future of the United States of America. So it's interesting to read that. I don't think you'd read that in any similar strategy in the UK, and certainly nothing like that in Scotland. But I was interested in some of the other parts as well. You might find some of these interesting. The United States should transition from an aid-focused relationship with Africa to a trade and investment-focused relationship. We don't need to read the rest. But I think great. Yeah, I think that's good. I think foreign aid can be a very mixed bag. I think countries become reliant on it, and then it can stunt genuine economic growth and entrepreneurial spirit. I think also it's very open to corruption. Who does the aid go to? Well, it goes to one group. What do they spend it on? Well, it's quite hard to check. And sometimes it ends up, well, not where the donors are imagining it ends up. But if you can boost the economy by allowing trade and investment, then all to the good, mutually beneficial. So all for it. That sounds good to me. What else have they got to say? Over the long term, it's more than plausible that within a few decades at the latest, certain NATO members will become majority non-European. Now, it's debatable what that means, isn't it? Are they meaning, someone who's like a third generation immigrant, but they're black? Are they counting that as that person as a non-European person? Are they meaning people who weren't born in Europe, who've arrived during their lifetime as adults? Not quite sure. what they mean. Anyway, they say, as such, it's an open question whether they will view their place in the world or their alliance with the United States in the same way as those who signed the NATO Charter. And again, it's a valid point. I mean, there's something in that. If you imagine, for example, in Britain, a lot of Muslims support the Palestine cause. So in terms of foreign affairs, that's their number one priority. A lot of them. They're not particularly bothered about Ukraine or other issues, but Israel, Palestine, top of the agenda, obliterates every political issue in Britain. Most important thing for them. So if in a nation, let's say Belgium, for example, let's say it reaches the point where those people are the dominant community, that mindset is the dominant one, how will Belgium see NATO membership? I suspect they'll see it as, they just won't be interested in it. They won't see it as aligning with their priorities on the world stage. So I think that's a very valid point for the United States to be concerned about. I think it's a very valid point for every NATO member country to be concerned about as well. Right, what else are they saying? That promoting European greatness. American officials have become used to thinking about European problems in terms of insufficient military spending and economic stagnation. Well, yes, there's truth in this, but Europe's real problems are even deeper. Continental Europe's been losing share of global GDP down from 25% in 1990 to 14% today. Now, that's partly because the rest of the world's been getting richer. Okay, ideally, a continent, Europe, would have been wanting to keep up, but it is mainly because the rest of the world's got richer. Anyway, partly to national and transnational regulations that undermine creativity, industriousness, yes, overregulated, sort of left-wing governments across Europe, the European Union, then yeah. But this economic decline is eclipsed by the real and more stark prospect of civilizational erasure. This is the view of the United States government. The larger issues facing Europe include activities of the European Union and other transnational bodies that undermine political liberty and sovereignty, migration policies that are transforming the continent and creating strife, censorship of free speech and suppression of political opposition, cratering birth rates, and loss of national identities and self-confidence. Absolutely true. It's absolutely true. I think the United States government is also correct to see this as a security issue. In terms of the NATO alliance and the countries in it, the member countries, to what extent are they going to be able to afford effective defense? And to what extent are they going to have the attitudes, values, and priorities among their population to be active members of NATO? So if, for example, I mean, this may be a silly illustration. Imagine the United States was attacked, say, how many European citizens would think, all right, we've got to spring to its defense? And how many European citizens would think, oh, great, who are they fighting against? I want to go and join the other side. So these are very valid issues to consider. Now, there should be very important issues in Europe as well. The last bit, should present trends continue, the continent will be unrecognizable in 20 years or less. As such, it's far from obvious whether certain European countries will have economies and military strong enough to remain reliable allies. That's what I was saying, basically. So, yeah, that was quite interesting, wasn't it? Interesting to see that view from over the pond. And I think it's quite right. I think they're exactly the concerns that the United States ought to have. So, to one extent, I think European NATO members are feeling that America's letting them down, is becoming unreliable, and I think they're right, and I don't approve of that. But I think America is also correct to look at Europe and think, how reliable an ally are these nations going to be as their populations change and the values of their populations change? So that's a very, very interesting issue. Robert, this is coming in on the foreign aid thing. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's why foreign aid can be counterproductive, whereas investment can be very valuable. Right, Jack, SFP needs an anti-abortion AI like Amelia. I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you could explain more, I would be very interested. Right, the US population is likely to have a fall in population in 2025 due to abortion and deportation. Yes, I'm not surprised about that. I think America population-wise, the birth rates, they're much healthier than Europe, but they are going down a bit. America is very attractive to immigrants, so I think they could bring in people of whatever characteristics they like. If they want like English-speaking Christians, they could probably get a decent number of those wanting to go to America. But yeah, the same issues are coming to America. The birth rate issues are the same all around the world. I think I've heard them more or less spot from Israel. Israel's got a very healthy birth rate. But even countries like Nigeria with sky-high total fertility rates, they're declining at quite a significant rate. So any countries relying on a sort of forever feed of people from poorer countries or countries with massively growing populations, that's not necessarily always going to be there. Anyway, moving on. So this is a bit of a news story about reform. This is Nigel Farage speaking. And it's basically saying the worst thing about his job is dealing with reform's councillors who sort of go off script, if you like, embarrass the party. So they won 677 council seats in 2025. Dozens of councillors have been forced to resign, been expelled or suspended from the party. Last October, 5 Reform councillors from Kent County Council were expelled for leaking footage of an angry meeting. Last month, Mr. Farage demanded an apology from a mayoral candidate who suggested David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, should go home to the Caribbean. Now, to be honest, all parties have this issue. I mean, even the Scottish Family Party has had this issue to a small degree, and we've acted very decisively in some cases. And we've chopped candidates. We've said we just can't be associated with that sort of view or that sort of expression. But all parties have that. But I think reform, it's a particularly acute issue, as it was with it was even worse with UKIP before then. But with reform, it's still quite a significant issue. And I can see why. Because if you've got a party like Reform, who, I mean, you wouldn't maybe call it an insurgent party anymore, but not too long ago, it was seen as an insurgent party, populist, attracting people who are wanting something harder line than the Conservatives. The Conservatives generally would be pretty well behaved. Okay, you might think that they'd be a bit wet and feeble and ineffectual, but they wouldn't be embarrassing themselves by saying outrageous things and extreme things generally. So reforms tended to attract some people with some sort of quite angry, hardline views, and that's going to be a big problem for them into the future. Because, I mean, how do you vet someone? It's really difficult. Some people have got no social media, or they just delete their social media before they go through the vetting process. And you can meet someone and chat to them for ages, but you don't realize what might be there underneath. So I think that there's still a high risk of reform elected representatives going off script in big ways. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens in the Scottish Parliament. Current polling, they're going to get, say, 20 MSPs, which they'll basically take off the Conservatives. Conservatives have now got about 30. They'll go down to about 10, and Reform will get about 20. So the overall balance of the Parliament is not really going to be affected by the rise of Reform. But the type of person in the Parliament will be. From my personal point of view, I would say in some ways they might be more outspoken. They might challenge the consensus a bit more, which will be good. But I also am concerned that they're likely to have some characters who don't know where the line is in terms of what you ought to say and what you ought not to say, or think and ought not to think. So we'll see how that goes. It'll be very interesting. They've declared a leader now in Scotland, but they haven't declared candidates yet. So let's see how that goes. So moving on. Now, still on the subject of America. Actually, I've got this in slightly the wrong order. Graham Linehan tells Congress, so he went to address the government the Congress in America, and he urged them to sanction Britain over free speech violations. So what do you think about that? So he's saying basically punish Britain, punish British industry, the British economy, for free speech violations. Now, maybe when you hear that, maybe your first thought is, oh yeah, that'll teach him, that'll teach Keir Starmer a lesson, that'll teach the Labour Party. But then on the other hand, do you really want to call for someone to damage the UK economy over the issue? People can end up losing their jobs. I'm not sure about that. That doesn't seem quite right, to be urging a foreign government to be taking action against your own country. Okay, there might be extra, like if you're in Iran, then okay, fair enough. If you say to America, please come and bomb the Shah and the national, whatever they're called, guards, national guards, whatever they're called, the Iranian military. Okay, fair enough. We're not in that sort of situation. So I'm not sure about that. What's anyone think? Is that appropriate to ask the United States to sanction Britain? I mean, fair enough to ask them to raise the issue in meetings or to publicize it or to try and embarrass Britain about them or put them at the bottom of the league table or whatever. Okay. But to ask for sanctions, I guess, Graham, it's not going to be you who's going to lose your job to do the sanctions. It's not your business that's going to be wrecked. So I would suggest that you think again on that one. Right, another quick snippet before we get into some longer issues. We were talking about Hungary before, that Hungary have got very aggressive, not the word, very dynamic pro-family policies, and they're making a difference. Their birth rate is healthier than a lot of other European nations, but it's still not high enough. I mean, they haven't solved the problem by a long way. But their latest scheme is in the bottom paragraph here, and it says, under this plan, women of the age below the age of 40 who are marrying for the first time are eligible to a $35,000 interest-free general purpose loan. Now, I assume that's translated into American dollars. The entire loan would be forgiven for those with 3 offspring. So about 2,400 families applied for the loan within 2 weeks of its launch. What do you think of that idea? So if you imagine it here, so a couple get married, the government gives them what's technically a loan of, I don't know, £25,000 or whatever, so they can use it for the deposit of a house. And then over the years to come, but the way it could work is, say, when you have your first child, 25% of the loan is written off. And every second child, 25% is written off, etc. So if you have 4 children, it's all written off. 3 children in Hungary. Now, I've heard about this idea before. I thought, that sounds quite good. That seems quite a sensible policy to me. It's got a lot going for it. You've always got to think how people might exploit it and might try and game the system. And you might have some people who would take the money, spend it all, and then they can't pay it back, etc. There's all sorts of possible problems. But basically, it seems like a good idea. There's one thing that really counts against it, though. You can see what you think. Does this concern eliminate it as a possibility? The concern is, this was pretty well the policy of the Nazis. This is what the Nazis did. They same objectives. They wanted to increase the birth rate, encourage family life, and so they had an identical policy. You got a loan when you got married, and it was written off as you had children. I think you needed 4 children for it all to be written off. So that's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, should you write off what's a good policy because bad people had the idea? I think you probably shouldn't do. But politically, it could be quite tricky. You go into your BBC interview. Oh, yes, we've been looking at your loan policy to families. Were you aware that that's the same as the Nazis? I don't know. So it's not our policy at the moment. We have considered it, but I think there's a lot of reservations about it, that maybe it would not work out in practice. But it's an interesting one. Right, Graham Lenehan, back to him. Graham's career has potentially been badly damaged, as have others. Okay, right, good point. So you're sympathetic to him. Yeah, I was talking about people losing their jobs, losing their livelihoods. I guess that's happened to him. But I guess if there were sanctions, he would be wanting it to happen to other people. I mean, if you're wanting to basically make a point to the government, you need to do something ideally that hurts the government directly, not hurts other people, and then the government pay the price as a knock-on effect. So say if you can embarrass the UK, say publish a report on it, talk about it when you meet them in public, put them bottom of the league table. I would prefer those sort of things. If he was calling for those, I would be right behind it. Right, another quicker snippet here on the demographic. Well, it's partly demographic, probably other factors as well. HMRC figures, so tax figures, showing that more over 70s pay income tax in the UK than under 30s. More people over 70, in other words, well over retirement age, pay income tax than people under 30. That seems really concerning to me. It's partly because of demographics. We've got an aging population. There are ever more people over the age of 70. People are working longer, which I guess in terms of the economy is a good thing. But I think the concerning side is how few of the under 30s are paying tax, are actually got a full-time job, earning a reasonable wage to the point where they're paying tax. But overall, that's not a sustainable situation where you've got the younger generations who should be the real engine of the economy, really. The dynamism, the hard work, people through their 20s, but particularly their 30s and 40s and 50s. So that's quite concerning, a striking statistic. Right, this story, classic BBC. In fact, we could have had a quiz there. I could have said to you which news outlet put this story on its front page, and you could have guessed it would be the BBC. So a couple of days ago, the top story in Scotland was this. This is a player from, I can't remember the name of this team, Galashiels Fairy something or other. Okay, so a non-professional football team. I'd never heard of it. And the article is, years after coming out as Scotland's only gay footballer, I'm so much happier. And that's a news story. So I think the BBC, I understand, have got a special LGBT journalist whose job it is to feed these sort of stories into the news. And this was a top story. There's no way that should be anywhere near being a top story. So the BBC uses their news page as a campaigning outlet as well. So it's 80% news, 20% whatever they want to push that week. So that is a classic case. Right. Hello, John. Right. Family party policies on tax breaks for families with children look really positive and progressive. So they should. Because the other parties think the way you help families with children is you basically take the children off them for as long as possible. So you provide them with breakfast club. That's the big thing in Scotland. And it's interesting. Since we've had a Labour government in the UK, they do exactly the same things the SNP have been doing in Scotland. So breakfast clubs, after school clubs. In other words, they assume that what every family wants is they want to spend as little time as possible with their children. The mum and dad both want to be off at work. So if the state can look after the kids, then you've fulfilled their needs. That's really what they wanted. So for parents who are thinking, well, actually, we want to spend more time. Let's say mum wants to spend more time with her own kids. Doesn't enter into the equation. That there's not interested in that, whereas we are very much interested in it. That's the one. Gala Ferrydean. That's the team that a retired footballer used to play for. Right, that is Jeremy Balfour. Jeremy Balfour, former Conservative MSP. He resigned from the Conservative Party, basically because he thought it went too right-wing and populist under Russell Finlay. I mean, it did move in that direction under Russell Finlay. I don't know if that was the right strategy or not. I'm not sure. But I think Jeremy Balfour would be one of the Conservatives who could really jump over into the Lib Dems, and it wouldn't be much of a wrench. Very much on the sort of left of the Scottish Conservative Party, which it was never been particularly right-wing. But he's standing for election as an independent in Edinburgh and Lothians, which is interesting. So he's making comments on various things. Obviously, what he's really doing is he's election campaigning. Obviously, he's trying to get his face there and get people to be aware of it. I don't think he's got any chance of getting elected. One of his unique selling points is that he is a Christian. He's an evangelical Christian, but he has been the opposite of outspoken in his time at the Parliament. He has been very, very, very quiet on a lot of key moral issues that have come before the Parliament. I did a debate with him years ago about Christians in politics, and I always remember him saying, you can't be a prophet and a politician. And looking at Jeremy Balfour's time in the Parliament, he most definitely hasn't been a prophet. He's maybe been a politician, but he definitely hasn't been a prophet. Anyway, but the point is to see what he's calling for here. Put pupil support assistants in every primary school classroom. What do you think of that? So in other words, well, not quite doubling the staffing of every primary school. So every class where currently you've got a teacher, he wants another person in there as well to deal with pupil support. Now, to me, that's like Lib Dem thinking, which is like Conservative thinking, because they're very similar in Scotland. I just think that's not the way to go. The way to go isn't to say we're just going to put more and more professionals in, we're going to spend more and more money, more and more specialist support. But at the moment, I mean, going on half of pupils in Scotland are registered with some sort of specific learning difficulty, and the schools and the councils just can't cope with it. So you've got a lot of unhappy parents thinking the needs of their child are not being met. But actually, they're probably being overly diagnosed. And if the school was run on a different basis, if discipline was a bit firmer and things were a bit more formal, then you wouldn't need these assistants. And if really difficult children were properly dealt with, either removed from the classroom, removed from the school, then that wouldn't be the need. So the idea that you're going to basically double the staffing in primary school classrooms across Scotland is a crazy idea. It reminds me of G.K. Chesterton when he said, some people think that the state can just breed agents like rabbits, that you can just have as many paid state agents as you like to do whatever it needs doing. You just can't. The solution's got to be to make the classes so that they can be controlled perfectly well and taught perfectly well by one good professional teacher, which should be able to happen if the rest of the system is working properly. But I'm afraid, I think Jeremy Balfour's pitch there, quite a few people think, oh, that sounds good. My kid at school will get a bit more help. But it's not the way to go. It's not realistic. Right, this is a return to a story. Remember the Axe Girl of Dundee? Do you remember that? It was back in August last year, I think. It came out on social media. It went viral. Elon Musk, Tommy Robinson, you name them, commenting on it. And it was a girl like brandishing an axe and telling someone to get away from her. And initially, the news reports indicated that she was sort of brandishing this axe at a Bulgarian man or a Bulgarian couple, and they were protesting their innocence. And the police comments at the time seemed to be, there was nothing untoward going on there. I think the girl was maybe arrested. And there was a lot of speculation at the time, a lot of rumor about what had gone on, that actually this Bulgarian man had behaved badly towards the girls. But to me, it seemed like speculation. There didn't seem any good evidence for that. And I thought people were getting carried away with this. But it's now turned out a much lower key, mind you. I think the media are deliberately keeping that, not making it clear what this story is related to. But the headline should be like Dundee Axe Girl case, new information. But they're not. They're making it sound like something completely different. But this is the same case. A man and woman have appeared in court accused of assaulting two girls in Dundee. So basically, the man who was protesting his innocence is now being charged. It is going to court that he had made attacks, been aggressive towards these girls. 12-year-old girls also been referred to the children's reporter in connection with an alleged offence, which is probably brandishing a deadly weapon at the person. So it does seem like, we'll wait and see the outcome of the case, but certainly there's reason to believe that there may well have been some sort of attack or aggression towards them. Right. Does that mean that the people who were speculating at the time were right to do so? Not necessarily. At the time, I was veering on the side of saying, look, we don't really know what's going on here. People are getting carried away. The initial indications are that they haven't been mistreated. Okay, so was I wrong? I said not necessarily, because people might be speculating beyond the evidence and happen to be found to be right later on, but that doesn't mean that their speculations were justified. But it's interesting that it does seem that there was a genuine problem there. So we'll follow that case and see what happens. But interesting to see what happens with the girl as well. We probably won't know what happens with the girl because of her age. That will be secret. Let's give that a miss for now. Babies in noisy nurseries could be slower to talk. I've often talked about the fact that the Scottish government talks about nursery as the best start in life. Not so sure. I think being with mum is probably the best start in life. But right, let's skip on. Let's leave that. Now, this is an interesting one, actually, on the nursery subject as well. I read this. I was quite surprised to read it, and I'm not quite sure what I think. So let's have a look. This was from the Family Education Trust, which is an organisation I've got a lot of respect for. I know some of the people involved in it down in England. So, another male nursery worker has been found guilty of raping and sexually assaulting 5 toddlers. And it is another. There have been a significant number of these recently. Yeah, the government continues with its drive to diversify the early years workforce and recruit more men to work in nurseries. Right, ditto Scotland. The Scottish government has been doing that for years. I made a video about it a while ago, that they were actually actively trying to get men to come and work in nurseries. Some professions should be restricted based on sex, and it shouldn't be regarded as hateful to discuss this. Discuss. And I'm not sure. I think so. So the person writing it is suggesting that being a nursery worker should be a female-only profession. To be honest, would that eliminate abuse? It virtually would. Well, it's probably more or less completely eliminate sexual abuse, almost completely. Would it be fair to do that? I think normally we'd say, well, there's a fairness issue to balance against that. So my initial reaction is that the fairness issue overrides the risk issue, because you'd end up saying, well, how about banning men from being primary school teachers? How about men from working here, there, or the other? I'm not sure. So, I mean, any thoughts? Anyone in the comments? What do you think? Greg, you just popped up. What do you think? I mean, do you think it could possibly be justified to do that? I remember years ago there was a story that an airline sometimes had unaccompanied minors. So you've got a child on the airline. There's not an adult with them. They might be, say, I don't know, 12 years old or whatever, or 10. And the staff with the airline would look after the child. They would take them onto the airplane. They would sit them down in their seat. They would keep a special eye on them as well. And then they'd take them off the airplane and hand them over to someone when they get to the destination. And one of the airlines had a policy that they would never sit a man next to an unaccompanied minor, on the grounds that there's higher risk of some sort of basically sexual assault or whatever. There's a higher risk if you put a man next to the child. And again, I think that's probably true. In that case, is that unfair discrimination against men? I'd be inclined to say no, because who cares if you don't get to sit next to the unaccompanied minor on the aeroplane? I mean, probably men would think, well, that's probably quite a good thing. They'd probably rather not sit next to a kid who might be up to who knows what. So then that's okay. But in this case, I'm not so sure. So we've got someone's vote here. Aaron, saying that seems quite reasonable. Okay. Yeah, I haven't thought to my conclusion here. My initial reaction is probably I don't think you should do that, because that sets a precedent. But happy to discuss it. Right, Robert, this is an example where targeted discrimination is necessary instead of attacking all men in general. Yeah, I mean, I guess the victim, if you like, if there was this sort of regulation brought in, or the person who might claim they're treated unfairly, was the man who really feels he likes working with kids of that age, just enjoys it, or that's the job available, and he would like to do it. I mean, is it just tough luck for him? Are there other similar things he could do? I don't know. Being a man isn't a protected characteristic. I think it is, isn't it? Sex is a protected characteristic. So technically, it is. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I think that would contravene the Equality Act to try to. You'd really have to justify that very clearly and powerfully to be able to get that past the Equality Act. That was interesting. That made me think. We'll see if that becomes a talking point more widely. Right, I've got a few things to say about this gentleman, but particularly with the impact in the UK and in Scotland as well, because it's been quite wide-reaching. I haven't followed this case hugely closely, but I've got a rough idea what was going on. I think there's a real mystery about Jeffrey Epstein. I don't think anyone really understands where his money came from, and it's quite hard to understand how he had so many very rich and powerful people eating out of his hand. So they would message him in very respectful, formal tones, and he would reply back as if he was like doing it on his phone while he was riding his motorbike or something. Really sort of offhand, full of mistakes, casual replies, just as though he got the upper hand, and all these other people are deferring to him. A really bizarre setup. People talk about him being some sort of foreign agent. I mean, I don't think that's completely incredible, But I do think as well, his main driver does seem to be his basically perversions and distorted views. So a bit of a mystery, but it's quite shocking, the things coming out. So let's have a look what I've got here. Yeah, listen to some of the stories. It's interesting trying to work out where people's moral standards are. So this is one. British socialite put some girls together for Epstein. Annabelle Nielsen, fixture of the Primrose Hill set, appears in emails offering to set sex offender up with a number of women. Now, I think almost everyone would read that and think, oh, bad. All right, Epstein, bad. Annabelle Nielsen, bad. You shouldn't have been doing that. But on the other hand, let's assume these women weren't underage. Well, were they being paid? I mean, if they're being paid, prostitution is legal in Britain. Prostitution is legal. But I think it shows that people, in their heart of hearts, they think they know prostitution is wrong. So they hear that this is happening, they think, right, bad person. Shouldn't be happening. This is really bad. But then the law says, well, actually, it can happen. That's fine. Let's say they weren't being paid. They were just thinking, they were ambitious or wanted to meet some rich people or whatever. Then still, I think it's totally wrong what Epstein is doing. It's totally wrong what the women were doing. But again, it's not illegal. If they were being coerced or deceived into it, then obviously that would be could potentially be criminal. But what is made clear to me is the gap between people's intuitive moral standards and the law. Because a lot of things that have gone on in this scandal, people are thinking, oh, very, very bad, very bad. But actually, it's perfectly legal, which we will see in some of these coming up. Now, look at this. Miroslav Lajcak. That's probably pronounced completely wrongly, but here we go. An October 2018 text exchange between Miroslav, who was serving as Slovakia's foreign minister at the time, and Epstein appeared to show the two messaging about girls and diplomacy. After Epstein sent an image, which cannot be seen in the record, he replied, "Why don't you invite me for these games? I would take the MI girl." Who wouldn't? Epstein texts back. You can have them both. I'm not possessive, and they're sisters. And then it says, following the latest release of Epstein-related documents, this fella resigned from his current post as Slovakia's national security advisor. He is not accused of any wrongdoing. This is the BBC's report. He's not accused of any wrongdoing. But I think to myself, from my perspective, yes, he has been. That's wrong. Having sort of promiscuous sex with whoever some rich bloke can match you up with, that's wrong. Even if there's no coercion or whatever, he is accused. That is wrongdoing. But by BBC standards, that's not wrongdoing. Then you think, well, why has he resigned? Because everyone knows you shouldn't really be doing that. You see what I mean? It's interesting the way this is opening things up. Right, here's another email. Richard Branson. This is from. Now, I've got my same problem, which I've talked about before probably. That on my screen, the slide number pops up at the bottom of the image and it obscures part of the text. So we'll see how we do. So, dear Jeffrey, really nice seeing you yesterday. The boys in water sports can't stop talking about it. Anytime you're in the area, would love to see you as long as you bring your harem, however you pronounce it, harem, yeah. Again, just reading that, I think it's just wrong. I can't read the bit at the bottom. It's the bit at the bottom I wanted to read. So you can see that morally, that's wrong. But as far as the law's concerned, as far as the BBC is concerned, they're sort of thinking that's okay. So I think a result from this whole scandal is it's going to press a lot of people to actually clarify what they think is okay and isn't okay. Is the only factor the age? Is that really the only factor? Or potential coercion or deception? I think that's not the only factor. And I think most people agree with me on that. Another thing from this saga, Ghislaine Maxwell addresses Congress in prison clothes. Convicted sex trafficker is willing to exonerate Trump and Clinton in return for clemency, her lawyer says. I mean, surely this has got to be regarded as a joke, hasn't it? Surely this has got to be just thrown out straight away. I mean, what a ridiculous thing to say. In other words, if I say what you want me to say, will you let me free? instead of spending the next however many years in prison. Obviously, anything someone says under those circumstances can't be regarded as reliable, especially if they're making the offer. I mean, if they could exonerate Trump and Clinton, she should do that straight away as a matter of integrity. You should just say they were not involved, they're not guilty. But if you're trying to use it to get leverage, to get yourself released, I mean, what you said would have no credibility whatsoever. So, all right, let's have a look at this. Prostitution is legal in the UK? Yes, it is. Prostitution is legal, but some activities related to prostitution are illegal, such as soliciting in the street, brothel keeping, which would, the definition of brothel keeping would include like two women getting a flat and both working in the same flat at the same time. Advertising prostitution, if I remember right, there's a bit of a grey area. The law's not clear. But yeah, so basically prostitution is not illegal in Britain, but some activities associated with it are illegal. Last week, the Scottish Parliament considered making buying sex illegal and making soliciting legal, but that was defeated because the SNP had got a grudge against Ash Reagan. So they voted it down out of spite. I've talked about that in a video recently. This is all morally sordid. We need a culture that's consistent in moral sexual standards. Absolutely. The secular culture can't make up its mind. 1 minute it's celebrating depraved sexual behavior in music videos and movies. The next they're holding the public to a much higher standard. Absolutely. It's dead right. I keep saying it's my favorite saying at the moment. It's a mess. It's a confused mess of society's values with regard to sexual relationships. We'll come to that a little bit more. In fact, let's jump straight away to Dr. Colin Morrison. Because, I mean, there's all this outcry about Epstein, who has, I mean, was it a 17-and-a-half-year-old girl that he was prosecuted for? I mean, I'm not excusing him in the slightest. But the Scottish government appointed Dr. Colin Morrison, who says we need to break down the barrier between childhood and sexuality. They put him in charge of sex education and appointed him to the Scottish Education Council. And he's now teaching at Edinburgh University about children's rights. And he's got another cushy number job in the government. So if you think about like Labour's connections with Epstein was he was a criminal. He was actively abusing women. But Labour's connection with him was much more tenuous than the SNP's connection with Colin Morrison. Going, Colin Morrison, they knew what he thought. He wants to break down the barrier between childhood and sexuality. Reading his dissertation, it seemed to me clear that he doesn't want age of consent laws either. And they take this man and put him at the heart of the education system to pass on those values to the children of Scotland. So he's a less sinister figure, but was welcomed in a much more enthusiastic way into a much more influential position by the SNP. So I think when the SNP is jumping up and down saying, oh, Labour shouldn't have had these connections with Mandelson, who had connections with Epstein, well, SNP needs to look a bit closer to home at what's been happening there. So the knock-on effect is right the way up to Scotland now, because Keir Starmer's been under massive pressure. So Anna Sarwar called for Keir Starmer to resign. At the time, I thought that was probably a good idea. People think Anna Sarwar probably thought other people would back him up, but a few of the MSPs did, but not many. So he was left on his own a little bit. Even if Keir Starmer did resign, they would struggle to get a new person in before the Scottish election. I mean, they maybe could do it if they expedited the process. But if you get someone just in with a few weeks to go, would it help them in Scotland? Maybe it would. I tended to think with Anna Sarwar, it's probably worth a roll of the dice because things were going to go pretty badly without it. I mean, now is it going to tend to be finished? I mean, Keir Starmer surely will he just get rid of him? It's very difficult to see. So a fair old mess there. But let's see. So this is from the SNP's social media account from X. I think so. It says, Scottish leader Anna Sarwar told us to believe in these two. What does that say about his judgment? So that's Anna Sarwar with Keir Starmer, who is now saying should resign. And that's Anna Sarwar with Peter Mandelson. And they're saying, oh, look at these connections. But you think, hang on, SNP. What about Alex Salmond? Alex Salmond's shenanigans. I know he wasn't convicted of anything, but no one's claiming that his behavior was good towards women, are they? No one is trying to claim that. He didn't even try to claim that in his court case. And that must have been widely known within the SNP. But they put up with him because that's fine, because they thought he was the best person most likely to get them independence. So it's really tedious, the routine mudslinging between these parties. They're constantly accusing the other of things that they do exactly the same things. It's really shallow and it's so pitiful, really. I mean, does it work? Is it the most effective campaigning strategy? I hope not, but they both work pretty hard on it. That's Tommy. Are you banned? Not by us. Certainly not. I don't know who you think might be banning you. No, your comments there, so obviously not. You're still here. I mean, again, so the SNP says, look at the people Anna Sarwar associated with. Ex-SNP politician Jordan Linden facing trial on the 16th of March, accused of 25 offences against 13 teenagers and young men. Several charges are based on alleged predatory behaviour during Dundee's LGBTQ Pride event. He was leader of the council in South Lanarkshire, leader of Edinburgh Council. There have been problems there. He was making sort of sexual advances, romantic advances, whatever you want to call it, to young boys who were Ukrainian refugees in Edinburgh. And so it just goes on and on. It's just a constant stream. But does it hit them at the ballot box? Will Labour get any less votes in the next election in Edinburgh because this has happened? No. People don't know. People don't connect it. People forget. I mean, in South Lanarkshire, is that the SNP finished? What could be worse? A scandal like that from the leader of the council. Will it make any difference to the SNP vote? No. Don't think so. People don't care, don't know, don't connect it, forget, don't follow local politics. I don't know. It's very, very frustrating. Right, we've got another. All right, so continuing with our friend Dr. Colin Morrison. I made a quick video about him last week, and I was saying that he did the rshb.scot sex education resources, which very much reflected his personal view that you need to break down the barrier between childhood and sexuality. He was really given full rein to express that view to the children of Scotland. And he also was on the Scottish Education Council. The Scottish Education Council is now defunct. The rshp.scot project is now completed. So what does he do now? As I say, he's lecturing at Edinburgh University on children's rights. I wonder if he's got a lecture about sexual rights, the rights of young people to explore their sexuality in safe and pleasurable ways, as it says in the sex education resources. Probably, I would bet a fair amount that he'll be pushing that view in Edinburgh University. But his other job was working for a Quango. It's a very part-time job. But this Quango gets involved when a school is proposed for closure due to lack of pupil numbers, for example. And this article was in the Daily Mail, calling it Scotland's most pointless Quango because it hasn't done any work in the last 4 years. Okay, and it's cost £250,000 since it last did any work, since it last had a school closure to look at. Okay, so Dr. Colin Morrison is now getting well paid for doing very little indeed. And with this Quango spent £83,000 in the 23-24 year for doing nothing, just sitting there waiting in case they have to swing into action to deal with a school closing. It's interesting. The Daily Mail published this story. They didn't seem to make the connection that this is the Colin Morrison that they've also published stories on when I provided them with the information about his values and sex education. But it's a different world. Once you get into this world, opportunities galore open up to you. You can go from third sector organization to charity to campaigning group to university, to government advisor. You just go around this selection of jobs and life's pretty straightforward, I think. And Colin Morrison is very definitely on that gravy train. It's in North Lanarkshire, not South Lanarkshire. Okay, I would, yep, I won't argue, even though I will a little bit. I think it was South Lanarkshire. I might be wrong. If you could find out, you could correct me. Yeah, that's a bit more information about this quango that doesn't do anything apart from give money to Dr. Colin Morrison. There's a new one from the Scottish Greens. Abolishing the monarchy. Has that been their policy for a while? I think it has. I find that quite sad because the Greens, they're sort of anti-patriotic. They want to do anything to undermine and criticize and diminish their own nation, and they will praise and glorify any other nation, basically. Particularly, the more different it is from a sort of Western European nation, the more they will praise it. I mean, my view on the monarchy is it does provide a central focus for the nation. There's something non-political people can unite around. Now, if you get someone coming, they might say, no, strictly logically, why should the king get to have that job? Why should we respect the king? He hasn't done anything. He's just been born into that. You can make all those arguments, but the net result of having a royal family is positive because it gives a focal point for the nation. And let's say there's some terrible disaster, the king can go, and he's like the incarnation of the nation. If the king comes, that's as though the eyes of the nation are there. The nation is coming and expressing its concern. If you don't have that, then you might have to have like Keir Starmer or John Swinney coming to see you in your hour of need, which maybe you wouldn't be too keen on. So I think the monarchy is very important, fantastic for tourism, and I think it just preserves an element of heritage in the nation as well that we can be proud of. So I totally disagree with them. But the Greens, they're pretty extreme. I find it frustrating. On the right of politics, people talk about like extreme right wing, far right. Do you ever hear anyone call far left? Not really. The political spectrum goes like far right, hard right, right, centre, centre left, left, hard left, Greens. So the word green in my political dictionary, the word green is like far left, extreme left, and they're showing it more and more. I think their tail's up because the Green Party is doing so well in England. Their spokesman is very articulate, but he hasn't got a clue what he's talking about. Absolutely no idea. I would say in Scotland, Ross Greer's got more idea what he's talking about, but is not as good a performer in front of the camera. Right, Inverness, we've got one event scheduled. We'll have a meeting in Aberdeen before too long. We've got one in Inverness. That's Saturday, the 21st of February, 6 till 7. We're doing our light display in the, what's the square called? Falcon Square. That's right, isn't it? Outside the shopping centre. So we're doing the light display in Falcon Square, 6 till 7 p.m. And then 7:30 till 8:30, we'll have a meeting in the McNabb's Bar, which is nearby. So do join us if you're in the Highlands. It'd be great to see you. And we'll be introducing our candidate in the Highlands as well. Kenny Stone is going to be our lead candidate. I think probably most of you haven't met him. We'll get him on the live stream before too long as well. So Kenny is going to be there. Right, a few minutes to go. So this is Liam MacArthur. Obviously, his assisted suicide bill is getting towards its second vote. The vote will happen before the election. It's quite an important part of the election campaign for us. If assisted suicide passes, that helps our election campaign. Could we put that on a leaflet, we'd repeal it. If it doesn't pass, well, our message will be a bit more woolly, but obviously we don't want it to pass. But what Liam MacArthur is doing is he's watering it down in every possible way to try and get it over the line. And from his point of view, that's the right strategy. What he should do is just give in to everything anyone demands about it. Just do it and get it over the line. Because once it's over the line, once you've conceded the principle, you've won. And the next steps can be taken. You can take them over the next few years. Because logically, once you've conceded the principle, it makes sense to keep extending it. So Liam MacArthur seems to be doing the sensible strategic thing, which is water it down, weaken the bill, accept all the reservations, accept all the amendments, get it over the line. The state can give poison to people so they can kill themselves and then worry about the next steps later. So I think that is what is happening there. And next month, we will find out how that has gone. Right, well, Greg, the monarchy can have great value as national symbol. I agree. Also depends on how the role is handled. Moral compromise in the symbolic head still has a downstream effect on the people. Yeah, absolutely agree. I think with Queen Elizabeth II, we had a very good run of an excellent monarch. I mean, Charles, even before he became king, got a slightly dubious record in some ways. Yeah, I mean, if Harry had been in line to become king, I mean, that would have been in trouble then, wouldn't it? I mean, but I guess that's part of the story, isn't it? It's part of the national story. That sometimes you have a good king or queen, sometimes you'll get a bad one. When you get a bad one, everyone can complain. But I guess still the nation is united in complaining about it. It's like part of the national story, isn't it? That sometimes you get a duffer or someone goes off the rails in one way or another, but people are still united in talking about it. Yeah, but it is a problem when you put a figurehead up on a hereditary basis that basically you don't know who you're going to get, and it can all go very wrong. I think with the British monarchy in the last couple of centuries, it's quite remarkable how well it's gone. I mean, there have been some problems, mainly short-lived, but overall, it's quite remarkable how well it's gone. I wonder if William has genuine Christian faith. I think not. I heard a while ago that Kate was showing more interest in spiritual things. But I haven't really seen anything from William. In fact, I've seen things that make me think William hasn't. He seems more a very mainstream thinker, I would say. I don't see anything that's indicating that to me. But so there's been millions of people praying for him, though, I am sure. Right, just 3 minutes to go. Let's see what we've got. Oh, that's just a quick picture from the March for Life in Paris. I think with us being in the English-speaking world, we tend to know all about what's going on in America, and maybe even in Australia, New Zealand, maybe South Africa. But we don't know so much about what's going on much closer in Europe because of the language barrier. But things like the pro-life movement in France, I mean, it's massive, massive. They don't win. I mean, abortion is legal in France, but it's a very big movement, and huge numbers of people will hit the streets. It was the same with same-sex marriage, I remember. There were massive demonstrations in France against same-sex marriage. Again, they didn't win, but it was a very significant show of strength. So I hope that they keep doing this, and I hope these movements grow stronger across Europe. I think it's very important, even when they're on the back foot and they're not the dominant force in society. It's very important to keep showing the numbers that are, keep expressing the view, and then more people will feel it's okay to say it. If people think a viewpoint is like a lunatic, fringe, tiny minority, extreme view, people will be uncomfortable to say it, and people will feel confident of saying, you can't say that. That's an outrageous thing to say. But if they see thousands of people on the street, it's harder to say, you said that, we're going to fire you. So these things, I think, are very, very important. It's good to see that happening in France. Right, 2 minutes. I've actually got some. I'll finish with a video. Actually, I've forgotten my videos. Let's just watch this. This is Mohammed Sarwar's dad speaking in Glasgow some years ago. Here we go.
Will come that there will be a law in place all over the world that there can be no disrespect to our beloved Holy Prophet Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And lastly, I want to say, as brother Imam Qasim has said, that we love our beloved Prophet more than our parents, than our daughters, than our sisters, than our sons. So there is no way. The message is loud and clear from the people in Glasgow, Scotland, and 1.5 billion Muslims all over the world, that any disrespect to our beloved Prophet and any burning of Holy Quran will be unacceptable, intolerable, and the Muslims will not tolerate this. And inshallah, I am sure that we'll be able to pass the law with United Nations and with European Union that in future, if anybody commits this crime, they will be prosecuted and brought to justice.
Right. You can forget that as far as I'm concerned. It's totally wrong. No, we're not going to have that sort of blasphemy law if I can help it. But it's interesting, isn't it, to hear that point of view. That's years ago. Now, Anna Sarwar's father, he was an MP. I think it was maybe the first Muslim MP in Britain. But then he resigned and he went to work in the Pakistani government. He became an elected official. I think he was like the governor of a state in Pakistan. But that was a view he was expressing quite a lot, quite a few years ago. I don't really hear that on the streets from Muslims anymore. I don't know if opinions have softened, or if Muslims who hold that sort of hardline view are less willing to express it on the street. But that was really very directly calling for restrictions on religious liberty. Totally, totally wrong. And the group of people with him were obviously totally on side with this. He was thinking that was the right pitch to those people, and he was right. It seemed to be going down very well. But that is very concerning. I say I haven't heard that so much recently. Mind you, Nicola Sturgeon was at the event with Muslims where there's a freedom of speech element, but hopefully that sort of thinking is receding among Muslims. But I think that is very dangerous. And just to say, to be consistent, there are a few, particularly in America, there are a few Christians who are starting to say, we want the state to prosecute Christian heretics, or people who blaspheme against Christianity, or people who teach religious teachings that are not compatible with their version of Christianity. That should be outlawed as well. And I think that's totally wrong as well. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech. People can present their case, listen to each other, argue with each other. I would be fascinated. Now, if I was a journalist, I would be saying, right, next time I see Anas Sarwar, I'll just check with him. I'll just clarify with him that he doesn't hold that view himself. What would Anas Sarwar say? I think he would say, I don't think that. People should be free. But part of him maybe were thinking, oh, am I burning my bridges with some Muslims if I say that? I don't know. But he should be. It would be fascinating to ask him, wouldn't it? That would be fascinating. But will any journalist do that? I think very, very unlikely. Right. Tommy, chat doesn't like names being mentioned. YouTube comments, right? I'm not aware of that being an issue. It's normal. Yeah. Anyway, right. So hopefully that was interesting. There's a couple more stories I had there I haven't got time for, as ever. But do join us next week and keep your eye on our social media. I say, as we're launching our fundraising campaign on Friday this week, and we'll be publicising our campaign dinner somewhere in the central belt between Edinburgh, Glasgow, Stirling, somewhere at that neck of the woods. If you could come along to that, we would love to see you. That will be a good night out. It's not a sort of hardcore fundraising thing where there's just activity where we're expecting your money. It's a campaign dinner. Obviously, donations are very welcome, but do come along. It'd be great to see you. Right, so thanks for joining tonight. Thanks for watching, and those who are watching online as well. And see you next week. Good night.